It started quietly, almost too quietly for anyone to notice. One evening, deep in a small observatory hidden among the snowy hills, a young technician was monitoring radio signals from space. It was his usual night shift, the kind where nothing exciting ever happened. The hum of machines, the flickering screens, and the faint static of radio waves filled the room. Then, all at once, the line on his monitor twitched. At first, he thought it was interference, maybe a passing satellite or a bit of space noise. But within seconds, the signal came again. It wasn't random this time. It had a rhythm. 3 short bursts, then 1 long, then 3 again. He sat up straight, staring at the numbers flashing on the screen. His hands hesitated before calling his supervisor. By the next morning, the entire observatory was awake. Teams of scientists gathered around the consoles, running tests, checking coordinates, comparing frequencies. The same pattern appeared again, then again, repeating every few hours. Across the world, in other observatories, similar signals began to appear. No one could explain them. It wasn't a satellite. It wasn't an echo, and it definitely wasn't random. The scientists began sharing data in secret groups. Within a week, the strange rhythm became a topic of quiet discussion in military circles and space research agencies. The signal wasn't just coming from one direction. It was moving, almost as if it were traveling across the solar system. Each day it drew closer to Earth. People on the inside were told not to speak about it. But rumors have their own way of spreading. Some said it was a comet carrying frozen radio frequencies. Others whispered about something alive, something intelligent trying to reach out. In the capital cities of powerful nations, meetings were held behind locked doors. Officials didn't want panic, but they also didn't want to ignore what could be the most important discovery in human history. Satellites were redirected, telescopes reprogrammed. Entire communication systems were quietly adjusted to listen. Then came the first clear image. A team in South America, using one of the largest telescopes on Earth, captured faint lights moving far beyond the orbit of Mars. The lights weren't twinkling like stars. They were in formation, perfectly spaced, perfectly aligned, like a fleet moving together. The footage was shaky, but what it showed made everyone in that room go silent. It wasn't natural. It couldn't be. When the news reached the scientific councils, disbelief turned to tension. Governments ordered silence. They didn't want the public to know yet, not until they understood what they were dealing with. But people talk, and secrets are fragile things. Within days, online forums and independent astronomers began posting about strange movements beyond Mars. Videos surfaced of glowing dots that moved faster than any known asteroid. The media started asking questions, but officials stayed quiet. When asked, they said it was a cluster of distant stars or a reflection caused by cosmic dust. Yet behind the scenes, things were moving fast. A secret project began, the largest cooperation of nations since the creation of the International Space Station. Scientists, engineers, and military leaders came together to form something entirely new, a mission not of war, but of defense and discovery. They called it Project Horizon. The goal was simple but daring, to send a fleet of advanced spacecraft to investigate the strange lights. These weren't ordinary ships. Each was built with new propulsion systems, enhanced communication technology, and shields that could withstand high levels of cosmic radiation. The world's best minds worked around the clock to finish them. For once, countries that rarely agreed on anything worked side by side. There was a quiet understanding. This wasn't about power or borders anymore. This was about humanity itself. While the ships were being built, the signals continued. The rhythmic pulses grew stronger, clearer. Some experts claimed the pattern resembled music. Others thought it sounded like counting. The strangest thing was that every few days the pattern changed slightly, as if it were responding to something Earth had sent back. In a control center hidden beneath a mountain range, a group of communication specialists tried to send replies, simple pulses of radio energy, mimicking the alien rhythm. But nothing came back. It was like shouting into the ocean and waiting for an echo that never returned. Yet hope remained. Among the scientists, there was a feeling that humanity was standing on the edge of something extraordinary. For centuries, people had looked up at the stars, wondering if they were alone. Now they might finally have their answer. Meanwhile, far from the secret labs and meeting rooms, the world carried on as usual. People went to work, Children went to school and life moved forward. Unaware of the quiet storm building in space, only a few knew the truth, that something was coming closer every day. As weeks turned into months, the mysterious formation beyond Mars grew brighter. Telescopes picked up strange energy readings, faint but structured like a code. Scientists tried to map the lights and found that their movements formed geometric shapes, circles, triangles, even spiral patterns. It was almost artistic. Some believed it was a method of communication, an attempt to say we are here in a universal language. Inside Project Horizon's headquarters, tension mixed with excitement. The fleet was almost ready. The pilots chosen were among the bravest and most skilled humans alive. Many were young, full of curiosity and courage, aware that they might be part of history or never return. Families were told only that their loved ones were working on an advanced space mission. No one outside the program truly knew what was at stake. When the final ship was completed, a silent ceremony was held. There were no cameras, no headlines, just quiet determination. The first mission since humanity's birth would not be about conquering another planet, but about seeking understanding and ensuring Earth's safety. Still, doubts filled the air. What if the lights weren't friendly? What if this was something beyond human comprehension? Scientists argued late into the night about what they might encounter. A civilization, an ancient probe, or something that defied explanation entirely. One engineer, while tightening a final bolt on one of the ships, whispered, "If they're coming, at least they'll know we're not afraid." His words spread through the team like a silent promise. The night before the launch, the base lights dimmed and the world outside was asleep. Only the hum of machines and the soft voices of the crew preparing for departure filled the air. In the command center, a handful of scientists stood watching the live feed of the stars. The strange lights beyond Mars shimmered faintly on the monitors, distant yet clear. Someone broke the silence and said quietly, "They're waiting." No one replied. The countdown began. The ship's engines came alive, glowing softly beneath the cold starlight. One by one they lifted off, disappearing into the dark sky, leaving behind a world that still had no idea what was unfolding above it. As the fleet rose higher, ground control listened to their transmissions, steady, confident voices reporting systems checked, engines stable, coordinates locked. The signals faded into static as they reached deep space, where human communication struggled to keep up. For the people left behind, there was pride and fear. Pride that humanity had taken its first step toward the unknown, fear that this step might never return. Days passed. The fleet moved beyond the moon, past Mars, into the cold silence between worlds. The strange lights were still ahead, still pulsing in their slow, deliberate rhythm. Every few hours the lights changed color, soft blues, then white, then crimson, like a message only the universe could understand. From Earth, the world's most powerful telescopes tracked the fleet's progress. Scientists studied every signal, every flicker of light, trying to find meaning. Reporters speculated endlessly about secret missions and strange cosmic events. But the truth, the real truth, was known only to a handful of people. Something was out there, something intelligent, and for reasons no one could yet explain, it was watching. As the fleet drifted farther into the black sea of space, the Earth below spun quietly, unaware that its greatest secret was now beyond the reach of gravity, heading straight toward the unknown and toward the encounter that would change everything. The news of the strange lights beyond Mars never reached the public in full detail, but the people who worked inside the hidden research centers knew it was no ordinary discovery. Every day the lights moved closer, and every week, the signals changed in ways no one could explain. The leaders of major nations met again and again. In secret rooms where the walls were thick and the air felt heavy with uncertainty, scientists tried to assure them that it might just be a natural phenomenon, maybe an unknown cosmic pattern, but deep down everyone knew it was more than that. The movement was too precise, the rhythm of the signal too thoughtful. It wasn't chaos, it was design. That's when the world decided to act. After months of closed-door discussions, humanity took a step that had never been possible before, the uniting of its best minds, best machines and best hopes under one secret banner. The project that had quietly started as a small investigation now turned into a global effort. Its name, Project Horizon. It began in an underground facility, carved deep beneath the mountains where no radio waves could escape. Inside, scientists from every corner of the world worked side by side. There were language barriers, cultural differences, and political mistrust at first, but the mystery above them was stronger than any border. Every person there understood one truth. Whatever was out there was beyond human imagination, and they had to face it together. The first phase was to build the fleet. They called it the Earth Fleet, but it was more than just ships. It was humanity's message to the universe, a sign that they were ready to meet the unknown. The ships were designed using the most advanced technology ever made. The engines used experimental plasma drives, capable of traveling faster than anything before. The hulls were reinforced with materials that could resist cosmic radiation and extreme temperatures. Every ship carried laboratories, observation decks, and powerful scanners to study whatever they might find. But behind all the metal and wires were the people, the ones chosen to fly those ships. The selection process was strict. Only the best pilots, scientists, engineers, and doctors were chosen. Each one was told only a small part of the truth at first, that they would be part of a deep space exploration mission. But when they signed the final papers and took their oath of secrecy, they learned the real purpose. Many of them were silent for a long time after that. Some felt fear, others felt pride, but all of them knew there was no turning back. Training began in full secrecy. Every morning before the sun rose, the pilots gathered in the simulation rooms, large chambers with screens that showed stars, planets, and the endless black of space. They practiced emergency scenarios, communication drills, and low-gravity maneuvers. The scientists trained too, learning how to analyze unknown energy patterns and biological samples. At night, when training ended, the crew members often gathered in the quiet cafeteria, talking in low voices about what might be waiting out there. Some joked to ease the tension, saying maybe they'd find friendly beings waving hello. Others stared at the stars through the glass dome above them and said nothing at all. The atmosphere around the project was unlike anything Earth had ever known. The outside world went on with its daily life. People went to work. Children played in the streets, unaware that beneath their feet, history was being written. Every ship in the fleet was named after an idea: hope, unity, vision, dawn, spirit. These weren't just names. They were reminders of why they were going. As construction went on, strange events began to happen again. The signals from space changed tone. They became sharper, faster, more complex. It was as if whoever was sending them had noticed the activity on Earth, as if they were watching. In one late-night meeting, the communication team played the latest signal on speakers. The sound filled the room, a rhythmic pulse that seemed almost alive. For a few seconds, no one spoke. It wasn't words, but it felt like meaning. Some scientists said it was a countdown. Others said it was music. A few thought it was a warning. The project leader finally said, "Whatever it is, it knows we're listening." Those words echoed in everyone's mind long after the meeting ended. Meanwhile, in the shipyards hidden across the desert, engineers worked tirelessly. The glow of welding torches lit up the night as enormous metal structures took shape. Every piece was checked and rechecked. There could be no mistakes. The success of the mission depended on perfection. One evening, as the sun set over the barren hills, one of the engineers stood on the platform looking at the nearly completed flagship. The sight of it filled him with both pride and fear. He whispered to himself, "We're finally reaching for the stars." By the time the fleet was ready, months had passed. The strange lights were now visible even to civilian telescopes, though most people still didn't know what they were looking at. The official explanation remained that it was a natural light phenomenon caused by dust reflection. Few believed it, but no one had the answers. Inside Project Horizon, the tension grew. The scientists wanted more time to study the signals, but the leaders feared waiting too long might be dangerous. If the unknown fleet was getting closer, Earth needed to understand what it was dealing with. Finally, the date was set. The fleet would launch. Before that day arrived, every crew member was given one chance to send a message home. They couldn't say where they were going, only that they loved their families and that they might be gone for a long time. Some recorded short videos smiling bravely. Others wrote letters that would never be opened unless something went wrong. The night before launch, the base was unusually quiet. The stars outside looked brighter, as if even the universe was watching. Some of the crew gathered in the hangar, sitting on crates talking softly. One of them said, "What if the lights are not coming to harm us but waiting for us to come to them?" Another replied, "Then we better not keep them waiting." They laughed, but the laughter was nervous. Deep inside, each of them wondered the same thing. What if they were about to meet something beyond imagination? In the control center, the leaders watched the monitors showing every ship, every system, every heartbeat of the mission. The hum of machines mixed with the low murmur of voices. Engineers checked data one last time. Pilots ran through pre-launch sequences. The countdown began. The engines roared softly, their light glowing through the darkness. One by one, the ships lifted off. First Hope, then Unity, then the rest. They rose slowly, then faster, cutting through the sky until they vanished into the black. Down below, those who stayed behind watched the screens until the last signal disappeared. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then someone whispered, "They're on their way." As the fleet left Earth's atmosphere, the crew members looked out of the small windows, watching the planet shrink behind them, blue, calm, and fragile. Many felt a lump in their throats. They knew they might never see it again. Once they entered the silence of space, the only sound inside the ships was the soft beeping of instruments and the faint voices over the comms. Everything worked perfectly. For now, hours turned into days. The fleet moved beyond the moon, then past Mars, heading straight toward the unknown lights. They could see faint glimmers in the distance, small, organized dots that pulsed in rhythm, just like the signals they'd received for months. Some crew members felt awe. Others felt dread. They had spent their whole lives dreaming of the stars, and now the stars were looking back. Meanwhile, on Earth, Project Horizon's command center tracked their every move. Rows of screens displayed data streaming in from the fleet. Everything looked normal, except for one thing. The mysterious lights ahead had started changing direction. They weren't staying still anymore. They were moving toward the Earth fleet. No one said a word, but everyone in that room felt the same chill. Something was about to happen, something the world would remember forever. The journey had only just begun, and already the line between fear and wonder was starting to blur. The Earth fleet moved through the darkness of space, a formation of shining vessels carrying humanity's courage, fear, and questions into the unknown. Each ship drifted in silence, connected only by faint radio signals and shared hope. Behind them, Earth was now just a distant blue dot, beautiful, fragile, and silent. Inside the ships, life was calm but tense. Every sound felt louder in space. The soft hum of the engines, the steady rhythm of heartbeats, the quiet voices of the crew checking readings. They were far from home now, beyond the orbit of Mars where no human had ever traveled before. Out here, even the sunlight was faint and cold. The mysterious lights they had seen for months were now closer, visible through the wide observation windows. They didn't look like stars anymore. They glowed with strange colors, sometimes white, sometimes golden, sometimes blue. They moved in patterns that no one could explain, shifting positions, forming shapes almost like they were dancing in slow motion. The crew stared at them for hours, trying to understand. The scientists recorded everything: light intensity, distance, movement speed, but nothing made sense. The lights weren't following the laws of physics. They appeared to move faster than light, then vanish, then appear again somewhere else. The lead communication specialist tried sending signals. Simple radio pulses patterned to match the original rhythm detected months earlier on Earth. The message repeated again and again. A greeting. An introduction, an attempt to say we come in peace, but there was no reply. Only silence. Then one day that silence changed. A soft vibration ran through the ship. At first, the crew thought it was a technical fault, maybe an engine adjustment or external interference. But when the sensors flashed red, they realized it wasn't mechanical. Something was sending energy toward them, invisible but powerful. The ship's instruments began to flicker and the lights dimmed for a second before returning to normal. "What was that?" one of the engineers whispered, staring at the flickering screen. No one answered. The same vibration repeated a few minutes later, softer this time, like an echo. The communication team checked the readings. It wasn't an attack, not a weapon. It felt more like a reply. The lights ahead had shifted position, forming a spiral shape glowing brighter at the center. Could it be a signal? One of the scientists asked quietly. No one could be sure, but everyone felt the same chill of realization. The lights were aware of them. Days passed like that, slow, tense, filled with both fear and wonder. Every few hours, the lights changed formation. Circles, lines, waves, some patterns repeated, almost like words in an unknown language. The fleet tried to match them with their own signals, using light flashes, radio bursts, and coded pulses. Sometimes the lights responded. Sometimes they didn't. The communication team started to notice something strange. Every time they sent a specific rhythm, the lights would move slightly closer. It was as if the unknown entities were listening and learning. On board, the crew began to feel the emotional weight of what was happening. Some couldn't sleep. Others spent hours at the windows, staring into the endless black, whispering their thoughts. One of the engineers said quietly, "It feels like they're testing us, like they're trying to see what kind of beings we are." Another replied, "Maybe they're waiting for us to understand." No one had answers. The air inside the ship grew heavy, filled with unspoken questions. Were they being welcomed or warned? A few days later, the fleet reached a region between Mars and Jupiter known as the asteroid belt. The ships had to slow down and navigate carefully, weaving through fields of rock and debris. The glowing lights followed, keeping perfect distance. It was as if they were guiding the fleet through a safe path. In the command center, the captain of the leading ship watched the radar closely. The unknown formation stayed exactly the same, symmetrical, deliberate. "They're not random," he said quietly. "They're flying with us." The data confirmed it. Whatever those lights were, they had intelligence. They moved like a coordinated team, always in sync, never colliding or losing formation. The scientists inside the fleet had no explanation. It wasn't technology they recognized. It wasn't human. That night, something happened that none of them would ever forget. The fleet received a transmission, not a sound, but a pulse of light that flashed across every ship at the same time. The pulse wasn't dangerous. It didn't damage anything, but it was powerful enough to make every light flicker and every heart race. Then came an image. It appeared on the central screens of every ship, faint, blurry, like static slowly forming into shape. It wasn't a human face nor any recognizable figure, but it looked alive, a swirling form of light and motion that seemed to shift and breathe. The communication team tried to record it, but the image vanished before they could stabilize it. For a few seconds after, every ship's system went silent. No data, no power readings, just stillness. And then everything came back online as if nothing had happened. "What was that?" a voice whispered over the radio. "Something tried to talk to us," another voice replied. The scientists began decoding the data that was captured during those few seconds. The readings were unlike anything they had ever seen. The light frequencies carried mathematical patterns, too structured to be natural. One of the physicists called it a handshake, a universal introduction. Back on Earth, the monitoring stations picked up the same signal. For the first time, humanity had received something that looked like communication from another intelligence. But before they could decode it fully, the fleet's transmissions began to break up. Static replaced their voices. Data streams turned into noise. Within a day, contact with one of the ships was lost. Then another. At first, command assumed it was interference from cosmic radiation, but soon even the main channel started cutting in and out. The last clear message received from the fleet came from the lead ship. The voice on the transmission was calm but urgent. "We are approaching the formation. The lights are opening." It looks like the message ended mid-sentence. Every attempt to reconnect failed. Earth's communication centers worked nonstop, sending repeated calls into the void, but the fleet was gone. No signals, no coordinates, nothing. Silence. Back on Earth, scientists and engineers refused to give up. They replayed the last known recordings frame by frame, searching for clues. In the final few seconds before the blackout, one image stood out. A wave of bright energy surrounding the fleet, forming a glowing ring that expanded rapidly. It didn't look like an explosion. It looked like space itself bending. Some believed the fleet had entered a different dimension. Others said they were pulled into a wormhole. A few whispered that they had been taken by whatever the lights were. But no theory could explain everything. Weeks passed. Then months. No trace of the fleet was ever found. And yet strange things started happening again. The lights near Mars disappeared too. Astronomers could no longer detect them. It was as if both fleets, the human one and the unknown one, had simply vanished together. Governments released statements saying it was a failed mission. They spoke of technical malfunctions, of tragic loss. But those who had seen the real data knew there was more to the story. In the control room of Project Horizon, the screens that once displayed the fleet's coordinates now showed nothing but empty space. A quiet sadness filled the air. Those who had worked day and night to make the mission possible sat in silence, knowing they might never learn the truth. But in the final report sent to the world's top scientists, one line stood out. A message from the last decoded signal before contact was lost. It said, in simple mathematical code, "We see you." No one knew who sent it, the fleet or the unknown lights. But one thing was certain. Humanity had reached beyond its limits, and something out there had answered. When the Earth fleet disappeared, it didn't happen slowly. It happened in a single heartbeat. 1 second, their signals were clear, their coordinates steady, their voices calm. The next second, there was only static. No warning, no explosion, no final transmission, just silence. In the command center buried deep beneath the mountains, confusion spread like wildfire. Technicians shouted over each other, rechecking systems, trying to reconnect. Screens flickered, showing empty readings. The lead controller's voice trembled as he repeated the call again and again. "Fleet 1, do you copy?" "Fleet 1, this is command." Nothing came back. For a moment, no one moved. The air felt heavy, as if even sound had been swallowed by something unseen. Then chaos erupted. Alarms flashing, data flooding, experts rushing to explain what could have gone wrong. But every system on Earth was working perfectly. It wasn't a malfunction. The ships were simply gone. The world above had no idea. News channels continued their regular broadcasts, morning shows, sports highlights, weather reports. People went to work. Students sat in classrooms. Families prepared dinner. No one knew that far beyond the skies, the greatest mission in human history had vanished without a trace. Inside Project Horizon's hidden base, the faces of those who had dedicated years of their lives to the mission were pale and speechless. For many of them, the fleet wasn't just a project. It was personal. They knew the crew, their families, their dreams. And now, all of them were gone. The leaders called for an emergency meeting. No one had answers. The scientists tried to explain it as an energy surge or a possible spatial distortion. Some said the fleet might still be out there but hidden behind a radiation field. Others believed they had been pulled into something beyond human understanding. In one corner of the control room, an older engineer sat with his hands covering his face. He whispered, "We pushed too far, too fast." His words went unheard in the noise, but they carried the weight of truth. Humanity had reached into the unknown, and now the unknown had taken something back. Within hours, every space agency on Earth was ordered to begin search operations. Powerful telescopes were aimed toward the region where the fleet vanished. Radio observatories sent countless signals into the void, hoping to catch even the faintest response. For days, nothing came back. Then, a strange discovery was made. A satellite orbiting near Jupiter detected a faint pulse, not from the fleet, but from the same region of space where they had disappeared. It was brief, lasting only a few seconds, and then it faded. The signal pattern was identical to the one the fleet had been following before contact. The same rhythmic sequence that had started everything months ago. Some called it a sign of life. Others said it was an echo, a recording left behind by the event. But deep down, many feared the truth, that the signal wasn't from the fleet at all. It was from something else. The governments decided to keep it secret. The public was told that the mission had ended in communication failure due to solar interference. Only a handful of people knew what had really happened, and they were bound to silence. But silence has a way of spreading. Rumors began appearing online. Amateur astronomers noticed that the strange lights near Mars had vanished at the exact same time the fleet did. Independent researchers claimed to have captured strange flashes in the same region of the sky. Some said it was a new type of cosmic radiation. Others believed it was proof that something had gone terribly wrong. Inside the project facility, the team that once worked with hope now worked with guilt. The empty control panels were reminders of the lives lost. The walls that once echoed with excitement now felt like tombs of silence. Every day, the scientists replayed the last transmission over and over, that single unfinished sentence before it cut out. We are approaching the formation. The lights are opening. It looks like, what did they see in that final moment? No one would ever know. Months passed. The official investigation ended with no results. Families of the missing crew members received letters filled with formal condolences and vague explanations. Lost due to technical malfunction, the report said. But those who had seen the real data knew it wasn't a malfunction. The fleet had been swallowed by something far beyond human control. Still, not everyone gave up. One small group of scientists continued working in secret, reanalyzing every signal the fleet had sent before disappearing. They noticed patterns hidden within the data, strange sequences that repeated across different transmissions. It was almost as if someone or something had inserted information inside their communications. When decoded, those sequences formed shapes, spirals, circles, and waveforms. They matched the formations that the unknown lights had displayed before the fleet vanished. It was like a silent message left behind. One of the scientists whispered, "They didn't destroy them. They took them somewhere." That thought kept hope alive, even when everything else had faded. Meanwhile, in the wider world, small anomalies began to appear. Some deep space observatories reported unexplained energy readings, brief flashes of light that appeared and disappeared without a trace. A few even claimed to have heard faint echoes of the same rhythmic pulse that started it all, but the signals were too weak, too distant, and too inconsistent. The world slowly turned its attention elsewhere. People forgot. News moved on. The mystery of the vanished fleet became just another unsolved story buried beneath politics and daily life. Still, for those who had witnessed it firsthand, forgetting was impossible. One night, a former communications specialist who had worked on Project Horizon sat alone in her small apartment, staring at the stars. She still had the recordings from those days, hidden copies she couldn't bring herself to delete. As she played one of them, a faint sound came through her old headset. At first, she thought it was a glitch. Then she froze. It was the same pattern. 3 short pulses, 1 long, 3 short. The same rhythm that had started everything. Her heart raced. She ran the data through her old software, checking for errors. The signal was weak but real. It wasn't coming from any satellite or known source. It was coming from deep space, the exact coordinates where the fleet had disappeared. She sent the recording to her old team in secret. They confirmed it. It was genuine. The pulse repeated for exactly 2 minutes before fading again. No one could explain how it had reappeared after so long. Some believed it was just an echo returning after years of traveling through space. Others thought it was more than that, a sign. That week, the scientists working in the shadows met again. They listened to the signal in silence, knowing they were hearing something no one else in the world had access to. The message was faint, distant, and haunting, but familiar. One of them said softly, "They're not gone. Not completely." No one answered, but every face in the room showed the same feeling, a mix of fear, wonder, and hope. As time went on, the mystery of the vanished fleet became legend. Some believed they had found a new world. Some said they crossed into another dimension. A few thought they were taken by beings far more advanced than humans could ever imagine, but no proof ever came. Only that faint rhythm, the same heartbeat of the universe, continued to echo from the depths of space every few years, as if reminding humanity that the story wasn't over, even now. Long after the official reports were forgotten, there are nights when observatories pick up short bursts of those familiar signals. No patterns, no explanations, just soft pulses in the silence, whispering across the stars. And each time it happens, somewhere in a hidden lab or lonely observatory, a few people still look up at the sky and ask the same question: where did they go? Because deep down everyone knows ships don't just vanish. Something must be waiting out there, still watching, still listening. And perhaps one day the stars will whisper back again. Far away from Earth, beyond the planets humans could see, a strange calm filled the space where the fleet had disappeared. No debris, no remains, not even a flash of light, only silence. But in that silence something stirred, something alive. The fleet hadn't been destroyed. It had been pulled into a place where space itself felt different. Not black, not empty, but glowing softly with shifting colors like light bending underwater. The ships floated there, untouched, engines silent, systems frozen. Inside the lead ship, confusion had turned into fear. The crew tried to send messages back to Earth, but every signal faded instantly, as if the space around them was swallowing sound. Their screens showed nothing recognizable, only endless waves of light moving like breathing mist. One crew member whispered, "Are we inside something?" No one could answer. Outside their windows, enormous shapes appeared. Not ships, not creatures, but patterns of light that moved with intention. They surrounded the fleet in silence, studying it, almost curious. The lights changed color, pulsing softly in patterns that looked like communication, but humans couldn't understand. Their sensors couldn't translate. And then, without warning, one of the light forms moved closer. The crew shielded their eyes as the brightness filled the cabin. The ship's metal panels vibrated gently, as if touched by invisible hands. Then something strange happened. The crew began hearing faint sounds in their minds. Not voices exactly, but feelings. Calm, questioning, and deeply aware. It was as if the lights were trying to understand what the humans were. Across the other ships, similar experiences unfolded. Some described seeing images from their own memories flash before their eyes. Others said they felt like time had stopped. There was no fear from the lights, only curiosity. The humans soon realized they weren't in danger. They were being studied, not by hostile beings, but by something so advanced it didn't even understand what fear or harm meant. One of the commanders decided to take a risk. He activated a visual signal, a simple light pulse in a repeating pattern, the universal human attempt to say, "We are peaceful." The glowing forms responded instantly. They copied the pattern. Then they changed it, adding new pulses in between. It was communication, slow, but real. The humans and the lights spent what felt like hours exchanging simple signals, shapes, patterns, rhythm. Each time the humans responded, the lights grew more active, more vivid, almost like they were learning. Then, suddenly, the crew's main display lit up with an unexpected image. It wasn't coming from their own systems. It was being projected from outside. The image showed Earth. Blue, white, green, floating beautifully in space. Everyone fell silent. The lights pulsed again, as if asking a question. The humans didn't know what to say, but they realized the lights were showing them that they knew where they came from. After a while, the color shifted again and the crew began to see images that made no sense. Shapes, structures, what looked like vast cities made of energy, moving through space like living organisms. It was as if the lights were showing them their own world. The crew realized then that they weren't looking at aliens in the way they had imagined. These beings weren't made of matter. They were made of pure energy, pure consciousness, existing in a layer of space humans had never seen before. Time passed differently there. The humans didn't age, didn't feel hunger or fatigue. They were trapped but not suffering, suspended between moments like living inside a dream. Back on Earth, months had gone by. The secret team still working on Project Horizon had picked up more faint signals, echoes of what seemed to be the same rhythmic patterns the fleet had used during their last moments. But these signals were different. When analyzed, they carried small variations as if someone was sending them back altered, like replies. The scientists couldn't explain it. One of them said softly, "It's almost like they're learning our way of speaking." Nobody believed it at first. But then, one signal came that changed everything. It wasn't random. It wasn't noise. It was a clear sequence, the same pulse code the humans had once sent to show we are peaceful. The entire lab went silent as the realization spread. Whoever, or whatever, had taken the fleet was now sending messages back in the fleet's own language. Across the following weeks, more of these messages arrived. Each one slightly more complex. The government tried to keep it secret, but the data couldn't be hidden forever. Small leaks appeared online, discussed by amateur astronomers and theorists. People began to whisper that the fleet might still be alive. Some believed it was just old data bouncing through space, but the patterns were too deliberate, too precise. Inside the strange energy world, the crew was finally beginning to understand fragments of what the lights were showing them. Through images and emotions, they learned that these beings had been observing Earth for centuries, not to invade, but to watch. They were drawn by curiosity, fascinated by the rapid growth of human technology and the energy humans carried within them, something they described not in words, but in light patterns that resembled a heartbeat. The beings didn't think in time the way humans did. For them, centuries passed like minutes. They had seen humanity rise, build, destroy, rebuild, and explore. And now, when humans had finally reached out into deep space, they had noticed. But the lights seemed puzzled. They showed images of wars, pollution, and chaos on Earth, then switched to images of kindness, music, and compassion. It was as if they couldn't understand how one species could hold both destruction and beauty at the same time. One of the crew members whispered quietly, "They're trying to decide what kind of world we come from." As days passed, the communication deepened. The lights began projecting shapes that resembled the fleet's ships, as if trying to learn how they worked. Then they showed the humans how they traveled, not through space, but through layers of energy that connected everything in the universe, like invisible bridges of light. The humans realized these beings didn't use ships at all. They were their own ships, moving through existence like thoughts crossing a mind, and yet they weren't gods. They had questions, curiosity, even wonder. They wanted to know about emotions, about what humans called love, fear, and hope, things that didn't exist in their world of pure energy. The crew tried to explain in the only way they could, by showing memories. One of them brought up a video stored on their personal device, an old recording of a family laughing at a dinner table, a child running in a backyard, a song playing softly in the background. The lights paused as the sound echoed. Then their glow softened, pulsing slowly in rhythm with the music. It was the first time they had ever heard human emotion expressed in that way. When the song ended, the lights shone brighter, surrounding the ships in a warm, golden hue. The crew didn't know what it meant, but somehow they felt understood. Back on Earth, the research team noticed something strange. The new signals they were receiving carried background frequencies, soft, rhythmic pulses that matched the tempo of human heartbeat and music. One scientist whispered, "They're talking to us through feeling, not language." Governments still refused to acknowledge it publicly. But among scientists, one quiet truth began to spread. The fleet hadn't been destroyed. It had made contact. Months turned into years. The signals continued, and always faint, always distant. And then one night, a new transmission came that stunned everyone. It was an image. When decoded, it showed the outline of Earth, glowing faintly in the center of the screen. Around it, dozens of light formations floated, arranged in peaceful circles. At the bottom of the signal, there was a single line of code written in the same pulse pattern humans had once sent out into the void. It translated to, "We are listening." For the scientists, it was the confirmation they had been waiting for. For the rest of the world, once the truth eventually leaked, it became a story that would change how humanity looked at the stars forever. Because the beings that once left the aliens speechless weren't invaders, and they weren't saviors. They were witnesses, watching, waiting, learning from a young civilization that had finally reached out with hope instead of fear. And though no ship ever returned, the message that came back carried something far more important than any technology or discovery. It carried understanding that even across galaxies, connection was possible. The fleet may have vanished from sight, but their presence echoed in every signal, every heartbeat of light that reached Earth. And perhaps, somewhere in that endless sea of color and silence, those humans were still looking back at their home, whispering the same message the stars had finally returned to them. "We are listening too." When the message "we are listening" reached Earth, the world stopped. For the first time in history, every country, every language, and every person had their eyes turned toward the same sky. It didn't matter who you were or where you lived. People could feel it deep inside that something bigger than human understanding had just touched them. At first, there was disbelief. News channels argued over whether the image was real or just a clever trick. Some scientists called it a cosmic coincidence, while others quietly said it was impossible for it to be random. The pulse pattern was too perfect, the message too deliberate. Then the recordings of the faint signals began to spread online. People heard the rhythmic beat, gentle, steady, almost like a heartbeat. It didn't sound mechanical or threatening. It sounded alive. For those who had followed the story of the vanished fleet for years, it was like a wound reopening. But this time, the pain carried hope. Families of the missing crew members cried as they listened. Many believed their loved ones were still out there, somewhere beyond the reach of time, communicating through the only way they could. In the government's secret underground labs, the experts who had worked on Project Horizon gathered for one final meeting. For years, they had hidden the truth from the world. Now there was no point in hiding. The message was out, and humanity had already embraced it. They replayed the transmission again and again. The image of Earth surrounded by glowing circles filled the dark room. The message below still flashed softly. "We are listening." No one spoke for a long time. Then one of the researchers said quietly, "Maybe they're waiting for us to listen back." It was a simple idea, but it changed everything. Soon after, a group of scientists from around the world formed a coalition, not for weapons, not for power, but for communication. They built a global signal array called Project Echo, designed to send peaceful messages into deep space, not with words, but with emotions and light patterns, sounds, and even music. The first message they sent was a simple sequence of colors, mimicking the same rhythm the fleet had once used: 3 short, 1 long, 3 short. Then they added something more. A soft melody created by combining the voices of people from every continent, singing one note together. When the signal was launched, millions gathered in open fields, rooftops, and city squares looking up at the stars. No one expected an answer right away. It wasn't about receiving. It was about giving. For the first time, humanity was united not by fear, but by wonder. Weeks passed. Then months. The message faded into space, carried by invisible waves. Nothing came back. But strangely, people didn't lose hope. Something inside them had changed. Schools started teaching about the fleet not as a tragedy, but as the greatest exploration ever attempted. Artists painted murals of glowing ships surrounded by circles of light. Poets wrote about the connection between stars and souls. Even religious leaders began to speak of the vanished fleet as a bridge between creation and discovery. But behind all this beauty, a quiet curiosity remained. What had really happened to the fleet? Were they still alive, drifting in that strange place of light and silence? One cold evening, one of the old scientists who had been part of the original mission sat on a bench near a quiet lake. He was retired now, his hands trembling with age. The night sky reflected perfectly on the still water. He carried with him an old tablet, one that still stored the final signals the fleet had sent. He played them softly, the same rhythmic pulses that had started everything years ago. The sound was faint, almost fading into the wind. He closed his eyes and whispered, "If you can hear us, we never stopped listening." At that moment, something unexpected happened. His tablet screen flickered. At first, he thought it was a glitch. But then, slowly, the same pattern appeared again. 3 short, 1 long, 3 short. His heart froze. The signal wasn't coming from the device's memory. It was live. He quickly checked the source, but it wasn't from any satellite or local transmission. It was coming directly from deep space, from the same coordinates where the fleet had vanished years ago. Tears filled his eyes as he stared at the faint lights on the screen. He whispered, "You're still there." The signal repeated 3 more times before fading again into silence. It was as if the universe had whispered back, "We hear you." He didn't tell anyone that night. He didn't want the noise of politics or media to drown it out. He just smiled, knowing the message had found its way home. In the years that followed, humanity began to change in ways no one expected. Technology shifted from being about power to being about understanding. New energy systems were inspired by the strange patterns found in the fleet's data, leading to cleaner, limitless sources of power. People started building observatories not for military defense, but for exploration and communication. Every time a signal was sent into space, people all over the world joined together, schools, families, strangers, turning their faces toward the stars. They no longer looked up with fear. They looked up with hope. And sometimes, late at night, observatories would still pick up faint pulses. Not clear, not regular, but enough to remind them that something was still out there. Some called it an echo. Others believed it was the fleet, still sending messages from that mysterious world of light. Whatever it was, the world had learned a lesson it could never forget, that humanity wasn't alone. And maybe it never had been. Even the children born years later knew the story. They grew up hearing about the brave explorers who had vanished not into darkness but into discovery. Teachers would point to the night sky and say, "That's where they went, into the unknown, to meet the ones who were waiting for us." Every few years, the faint pulse would return again, just like a heartbeat, soft, steady, distant. The same message each time: we are listening. One day, maybe far in the future, humanity would learn how to reach that place, not through force, but through understanding. Maybe they'd learn to travel not across space, but through the invisible connections between energy and thought. Until then, the stars remained both a mystery and a promise. On the anniversary of the fleet's launch, people across the world gathered every year to light candles or lanterns and release them into the sky. The lights floated upward, tiny reflections of hope against the night. As they rose, people whispered their own messages, not of fear but of gratitude, because the fleet hadn't vanished for nothing. They had shown humanity the most important truth of all, that the universe listens when you speak with heart, and even silence can carry meaning. Far beyond, in that shimmering realm of color and light, the fleet still drifted, and not trapped but transformed. Their ships no longer looked metallic. They glowed softly, merging with the same luminous energy that surrounded them. They weren't just explorers anymore. They had become part of the great cosmic current, learning, observing, maybe even guiding the same lights that once studied them. If you looked closely at the stars, sometimes you could almost imagine it. Faint streaks of silver light moving gently among the constellations, like distant travelers watching over the world they once called home. And though no one could prove it, many believed that when the night grew quiet and the world slept, those travelers could still hear the sounds of earth, laughter, music, the wind moving through trees, and that somehow, across that vast ocean of time and light, they smiled. Because they knew Earth was still listening, and that was enough.